The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, edges yellowed with age, postmarked from a city I'd never visited. My hands trembled as I held the envelope addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize, watching coffee drip onto the kitchen counter while my heart hammered against my ribs. 20 years of believing a lie, and now this. A stranger claiming to be the father my mother swore died before I turned 5. Good day, everyone. I am grateful you are here with me. Before we begin, I would really love to know where you are watching from. Comment your city below. Now, let me tell you about something that changed my life forever. I dropped into the chair by my kitchen window, the one that overlooked the magnolia tree Robert had planted when we first bought this house. My fingers worked at the seal, tearing through decades of questions. Inside, a single photograph slipped out first. A man with my eyes, my nose, my widow's peak, standing beside a motorcycle with mountains behind him. The resemblance punched the air from my lungs. I pressed my palm against the cool tabletop to steady myself. The letter itself was written in careful block letters, each word precise and measured. The man, Calvin Wright, he called himself, explained he'd been searching since 1998, hitting dead ends at every turn because my mother had changed our last name, moved us across state lines, buried every trace of him. He wrote about lawyers and private investigators, about following leads that evaporated like morning fog. His hands had touched this paper. I ran my thumb across the ink, testing its reality. My phone buzzed. Robert's name flashed on the screen, but I couldn't answer. Not yet. Not until I processed this earthquake splitting my foundation. I stood and paced to the sink, gripping its edge hard enough to hurt. Through the window, Mrs. Chen from next door waved while watering her roses. I managed a weak gesture back, then turned away. The letter included an address in Portland, a phone number with too many digits for me to count through my blurred vision, and a request. Just coffee, just once, just to meet the daughter he'd been denied. My mother's voice echoed from her deathbed 3 years prior, insistent even as cancer hollowed her out. Your daddy was a good man, but the Lord took him too soon. I'd held her hand, believing every word, mourning a ghost who apparently walked the earth 3,000 miles away. I grabbed my keys from the counter with shaking hands. The letter crumpled slightly in my grip as I headed for the door, needing movement, needing air that didn't taste like betrayal. My car sat in the driveway, covered in pollen from the neighbor's oak tree. I brushed off the windshield with my sleeve, smearing yellow dust across the glass. The drive to my sister's place took 15 minutes through familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. Traffic lights changed colors. People crossed at intersections. The world continued its rotation while mine tilted sideways. I parked crooked against her curb, not caring about the angle, and hurried up the walkway with the letter clutched against my chest, like evidence of a crime. The front door stood before me, painted that cheerful yellow my sister had chosen last spring. I raised my fist and hammered against it, 3 sharp strikes that hurt my knuckles. Movement inside, footsteps approaching. My chest heaved with each breath, sweat forming along my hairline despite the cool October air. The door swung open. My sister Denise stood there in paint-splattered overalls, a brush still dripping white latex onto her hardwood floor. Her smile dissolved the instant she saw my face. What happened? I thrust the letter toward her without speaking, my jaw clenched too tight for words. She took the paper, her eyes scanning the cramped handwriting while I pushed past her into the living room. Drop cloths covered her furniture. The sharp chemical smell of fresh paint burned my nostrils. I moved to the window, staring out at her backyard where her son's old tire swing hung motionless from the maple tree. Behind me, I heard the rustle of paper as Denise read. Once, twice. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled taut. I wrapped my arms around myself, fingers digging into my ribs through my cardigan. My reflection in the glass showed a woman I barely recognized. Eyes red-rimmed, mouth pressed into a harsh line, shoulders hunched forward as if bracing for impact. This can't be real. Denise's voice came out flat, mechanical. I turned to face her. She stood frozen in the center of her half-painted living room, the letter dangling from her hand. Her other arm had gone rigid at her side, the paintbrush forgotten, dripping a steady rhythm onto the drop cloth. A muscle twitched in her jaw. She looked up at me, and I saw my own confusion reflected back. Mama lied to us for 40 years. My voice cracked on the last word. Denise moved then, setting the brush down on the paint can with exaggerated care. She walked to her couch and shoved aside the protective covering, sinking down onto the cushions. Her hands pressed against her knees, fingers splayed wide. I watched her chest rise and fall with deliberate breaths, watched her try to process the same impossibility that had sent me racing across town. I paced behind her couch, unable to stand still. My shoes left tracks across the paper-covered floor. The afternoon light streaming through the windows seemed too bright, too normal for this moment. A lawnmower rumbled somewhere in the neighborhood. Children laughed in a nearby yard. Life continued its mundane progression while our history rewrote itself. She told us he died in that factory accident. Denise spoke to the wall ahead of her. We visited his grave. My hands formed fists at my sides. I remembered those cemetery trips, fourth Sundays, after church, laying flowers on a headstone bearing our father's name. Mama would stand there silent, us beside her in our Sunday clothes, believing we honored the dead. The deception of it made my stomach clench. I grabbed the letter from where Denise had dropped it on the couch cushion. My eyes found the lines again, though I'd already memorized every word. He wrote about searching, about hiring investigators, about doors slammed in his face and phones hung up before he could speak. He wrote about rights he'd signed away when my mother left, about promises he'd broken that made her run. He wrote about regret that aged him faster than time. He wants to meet. I pressed the paper against my chest again. Says he's been looking since Mama died. Denise's head snapped up, her eyes narrowed, and I saw anger finally breaking through the shock. She stood abruptly, moving to the fireplace where family photos lined the mantel. Her finger traced the frame holding our mother's portrait. That dignified woman who'd raised us alone, worked double shifts, never missed a school play or graduation. The woman who'd constructed an elaborate fiction and maintained it until her final breath. The photograph trembled in Denise's grip. She lifted it from the mantel, her knuckles whitening around the frame's edges. I watched her arm draw back, saw the tension coil through her shoulders like a spring wound too tight. The frame flew across the room and shattered against the far wall. Glass scattered across the hardwood floor in 1,000 glittering fragments. I didn't move, didn't flinch. The destruction felt earned, necessary even. My sister stood there breathing hard, her chest heaving beneath her burgundy cardigan. She'd always been the careful one, the measured one. Watching her unravel released something knotted inside my own chest. She crossed to the liquor cabinet my brother-in-law kept stocked. Her hands shook as she pulled out the bourbon, not bothering with a glass. She twisted the cap and drank straight from the bottle, throat working against the burn. When she lowered it, her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. I bent and picked up a shard of glass from the photograph. Mama's face stared up through the cracked frame, that serene smile I'd trusted my whole life, now looking like the mask it was. My thumb traced the jagged edge of glass until a thin line of blood appeared. The sharp sting grounded me, pulled me back from the spiraling thoughts threatening to consume everything. Outside, someone started a lawnmower. The mechanical roar drifted through the window screens, so ordinary against the chaos crackling through this room. I pressed my bleeding thumb against my jeans, leaving a small, dark stain. The letter crinkled in my other hand. I smoothed it against my thigh, reading the address typed at the top again. Detroit. He'd been in Detroit this whole time, just 300 miles away. All those years, close enough to drive to in an afternoon. My legs moved without conscious decision, carrying me to the window. The neighbor pushed his mower in straight lines across his lawn, methodical and predictable. Everything in its place, following patterns established through repetition. Denise's footsteps creaked across the floor behind me. I felt her presence at my shoulder before she spoke. "When are you going?" "Not if." "When?" She knew me that well. My jaw clenched and released. I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass, watching condensation form from my breath. "Tomorrow." The word came out flat, decided. She took another pull from the bourbon bottle. I heard the liquid slosh, heard her swallow. Her reflection appeared in the window beside mine. Two women in their 60s, looking suddenly older than our years. The resemblance between us had always been strong, but now I saw something else. I saw the shape of our faces, the set of our eyes, and wondered what features came from him. What parts of ourselves we'd attributed to Mama actually belonged to a ghost who wasn't dead. My sister set the bottle on the windowsill between us. Her hand found mine, squeezed once, then released. No more words needed. She understood the pull, the magnetic force of unanswered questions drawing me north toward a city I'd never wanted to visit. I turned from the window and walked to where my purse hung by the door. My phone sat heavy in my hand as I pulled up the airline website. My fingers moved across the screen, selecting flights, entering information. The mechanical process kept the larger implications at bay. Book ticket, reserve rental car, find hotel. Simple tasks building toward an impossible confrontation. The confirmation email arrived with a soft ping. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. departure. I'd be in Detroit by noon. The taxi deposited me at the address just after 1 o'clock. The house stood narrow and worn, squeezed between similar structures that leaned against each other like tired soldiers. Paint peeled from the siding in long strips, revealing gray wood beneath. A chain-link fence surrounded a postage stamp yard where weeds choked out what might have once been grass. I sat in the back seat, engine idling, driver waiting. My hands clutched my purse so tight the leather creaked. This couldn't be right. 20 years searching, and he lived here? The man who'd supposedly abandoned my mother before I was born, the man she'd told me was dead for 61 years, existed in this sagging structure? The driver cleared his throat. I paid him, stepped onto cracked pavement, and watched his taillights disappear around the corner. Movement caught my eye. The front door opened. A white man emerged, perhaps 75, with a shock of silver hair and shoulders that still held breadth despite age. He descended 3 concrete steps, each movement deliberate, careful. His eyes locked onto mine across the distance. My breath stopped. I knew those eyes. I'd seen them every morning in my mirror. That same amber brown, that same intense focus. He reached the fence gate but didn't open it. His hand gripped the top rail, knuckles whitening. We stared at each other across 15 feet of dead grass and decades of lies. Aisha! He said it like a prayer, like releasing something held too long underwater. My throat closed. I managed a nod. He pushed the gate open. The metal shrieked on rusty hinges. I forced my legs to move, carrying me forward on autopilot while my mind screamed questions I couldn't yet voice. He stood aside as I entered the yard, then closed the gate behind me with a gentle click that sounded obscenely final. Up close, I catalogued his features. The shape of his jaw matched mine. The width of his forehead. The way his ears sat slightly too low. All the traits I'd assigned to Mama's genetics now revealed their true source. He raised one hand as if to touch my face, then caught himself. The hand fell back to his side, fingers curling into a fist. "You came," he whispered. The words broke something in me. I stepped back, nearly stumbling on the uneven ground. He reached out reflexively to steady me, and I jerked away from his touch like he'd burned me. His face crumpled. Not dramatically, just a small collapse around the eyes, a tightening of the mouth. He turned and walked toward the house. I followed because I'd come too far not to. Inside smelled of old coffee and something medicinal. The living room held sparse furniture. A worn couch, one armchair, a television on a stand. Photographs covered every other surface. My steps slowed as I registered what they showed. Me. Pictures of me. Dozens of them. My high school graduation photo, the one that had run in the local paper. A clipping from when I'd won the Teacher's Award in 1998. More recent ones that looked like they'd been taken from social media. Probably screenshots from my daughter's Facebook page that I'd been tagged in. Me at church, me at family gatherings, me living my life, completely unaware of being documented. My stomach lurched. I pressed one hand against the wall to steady myself. He stood in the doorway to what looked like a kitchen, watching me process the shrine he'd built. His hands hung at his sides, helpless. How long? My voice came out hoarse. Started looking the day your mother died. Got the obituary. Found out you existed. He paused, swallowed hard. Been following from a distance ever since. 23 years. Not 20. 23. I'd miscalculated somewhere. I moved to the couch and sat before my legs gave out. The cushions sagged beneath me, springs poking through worn fabric. He remained standing, maintaining distance like I was a wild animal that might bolt. A photo album lay on the coffee table. I pulled it toward me with trembling fingers and opened the cover. The first page showed my mother, young and beautiful, maybe 19. She smiled at the camera with her whole face, the way I'd rarely seen her smile in my actual memories. And beside her, arm around her shoulders, stood the man now watching me from across the room. Decades younger, but unmistakable. I flipped pages, more photos of them together. Then one that made my breath catch. Mama, visibly pregnant, his hand on her swollen belly. The photo was dated. I did the math quickly. 3 months before I was born. She told me you were dead. I couldn't look at him while saying it. She told me to leave and never come back. His voice carried no accusation, just fact. Said she didn't want a white man raising a black child? Said I'd ruin your life. My head snapped up. His eyes glistened, but no tears fell. I was young, stupid. I left. He moved finally, crossing to the armchair and lowering himself slowly. Took me 38 years to realize I should have fought harder. I pushed the album away, its plastic pages crackling like old bones. My hands found the armrests of the couch and gripped until my knuckles went pale beneath my brown skin. The room tilted slightly. Blood pressure, probably. I'd skipped my medication this morning in the rush to get here. He noticed? Of course he noticed. His body shifted forward in the chair, half rising before I held up one trembling palm. Don't! The single word stopped him. He sank back down, hands clasping and unclasping in his lap. Outside, a dog barked 3 times and fell silent. The refrigerator hummed in the adjacent kitchen, normal sounds in an abnormal moment. I stood, needing movement, needing to not sit still while my entire history rewrote itself in real time. My feet carried me to the window. The curtains smelled of cigarette smoke and time. Through the glass, the parking lot stretched empty except for my rental car and a rusted pickup truck that must be his. You followed me. Not a question, a statement that needed saying aloud. To stores, your work, kept my distance. His voice came from behind me, steady but low. Learned your routines, your favorite coffee shop downtown, the library on Thursdays. My spine went rigid. Violations swept through me like ice water, followed immediately by something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like longing. He'd cared enough to watch, to learn, to know me from afar when Mama had stolen the chance to know me up close. I turned from the window. He sat forward now, elbows on knees, watching me with an expression I couldn't name. Hope mixed with terror, maybe. The same cocktail probably showing on my own face. Show me more. I gestured toward the album. He reached beneath the coffee table and pulled out a cardboard box, the kind that copy paper comes in. The sides bulged, held together with duct tape that had yellowed with age. He set it between us like an offering, then retreated to his chair. I knelt on the floor, ignoring the protest in my knees. The tape resisted, then gave way with a sound like ripping fabric. Inside, envelopes. Hundreds of them, all addressed in the same careful handwriting to an address I didn't recognize. No postmarks, never mailed. My fingers selected one at random. The envelope contained a birthday card for a 7th birthday I barely remembered. Inside, his handwriting covered every available space. Details about what 7-year-olds liked. Hopes that I was happy. Apologies that consumed entire margins. I pulled out another, and another. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, graduation cards for milestones he'd somehow known about. Letters describing his life, asking questions he knew would never be answered, telling me things a father tells a daughter over dinner tables and during car rides and in all the small moments we'd never had. You wrote to me. My voice came out hoarse. Every week, sometimes more. He rubbed his palms against his jeans. Never knew where to send them. Your mama moved around a lot those first years. By the time I finally tracked you down, I figured showing up would do more harm than good. I spread the envelopes across the floor, creating a paper river between us. Dates visible on dozens of them. The earliest from when I was 3 years old. The most recent from 2 weeks ago. Why now? I looked up at him. After all this time, why come forward now? He pulled something from his shirt pocket, a prescription bottle. The label faced me, and I recognized the medication immediately. Same type the oncologist had prescribed for my late husband during his final months. 6 months. He set the bottle on the arm of his chair. Maybe less. Lung cancer, spread to the lymph nodes. The floor seemed to drop away beneath me. I'd found him only to lose him. The cosmic joke of it hit like a physical blow to the chest. I stood, legs shaky, and crossed the distance between us. Up close, I could see the hollows beneath his cheekbones, the way his collar hung loose around his neck. Weight loss. Probably significant. He looked up at me, and I saw Mama's eyes looking back. The same eyes she'd studied in my face every day, carrying her secret like poison. My hand moved before my brain caught up. I reached out, fingers hovering inches from his shoulder, then making contact. The fabric of his shirt felt thin and soft from many washings. Beneath it, his shoulder blade pressed prominent and sharp. He didn't move, barely seemed to breathe, like I was a butterfly that might startle away. She was wrong. The words scraped out of me. Mama was wrong to keep you from me. His hand came up slowly, covering mine where it rested on his shoulder. His skin felt paper thin, liver spotted, warm. She did what she thought was right. He squeezed gently. The world was different then. I pulled away, angry suddenly at his defense of her, at the injustice of it all, at time itself, for running out just when we'd finally found each other. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I needed a father. The words came out louder than intended, bouncing off the cheap paneled walls. She let me grow up thinking you were dead. Let me grieve someone who was alive. The coffee table rattled as I kicked it, sending empty paper cups tumbling to the stained carpet. My chest heaved with each breath, decades of phantom grief converting to rage that needed somewhere to go. I spun toward the kitchenette, needing distance, needing air, needing anything but the skeletal man on the couch who'd materialized from the grave too late. My palms hit the counter edge hard enough to sting. The fluorescent light above buzzed and flickered, casting irregular shadows across the chipped laminate. Behind me, I heard him shift, the couch springs creaking under his diminished weight. My reflection stared back from the darkened window over the sink. A 61-year-old woman I barely recognized, face contorted with anguish. Aisha. His voice came quiet, threaded with exhaustion. I have something for you. In the bedroom closet. I turned, hands still braced against the counter. He was attempting to stand, arms trembling with the effort of pushing up from the cushions. Every movement seemed to cost him, muscles quivering, breath catching. The urge to help warred with the need to keep my distance. He made it upright, steadied himself against the armrest, then shuffled toward the narrow hallway. His gait had changed even in the short time we'd been talking. More labored, more unsteady. I followed several paces behind, watching his hand trail along the wall for support, leaving faint smudges on the yellowed paint. The bedroom was small, dominated by a queen bed with military precision corners. A single framed photograph sat on the nightstand. A young black man in army dress uniform, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on something beyond the camera. The resemblance to my own face stopped my breath. He opened the closet door with both hands, fingers fumbling at the knob. Inside, clothes hung sparse and organized, everything pressed and neat despite their obvious age. He reached to the top shelf, stretching on tiptoes with visible strain. His shirt rode up, exposing the sharp knobs of his spine. Let me. I moved forward, unable to watch him struggle. My hands found a shoebox pushed far back behind folded sweaters. It was lighter than expected, held together with rubber bands that cracked and broke when I touched them. I carried it to the bed, setting it down on the tightly tucked blanket. He lowered himself onto the mattress beside it, movements careful and calculated. His breathing had gone rough and wheezy from the minimal exertion. Sweat beaded his upper lip despite the room's chill. Open this box every year on your birthday. His fingers worked at the lid with trembling slowness. Added something new each time. The lid came free. Inside, newspaper clippings lay stacked in chronological order, edges yellowed and brittle. I lifted the top one, a high school honor roll list from the Chicago Tribune, my name circled in faded blue ink. Beneath it, a college graduation announcement Mama must have submitted. Then another, my medical school acceptance, my residency completion, my first hospital appointment. My hands shook as I sifted through 2 decades of my life, documented and preserved by a man I'd thought was buried. Each clipping represented hours of searching, of scanning newspapers from a city he didn't live in, tracking a daughter he couldn't contact. The paper felt fragile between my fingers, threatening to crumble. How? The word came out hoarse. Library microfiche. Later, the internet. He pulled out a manila envelope from beneath the clippings. Made calls sometimes, pretending to be a journalist, a prospective patient, just to hear about you. The envelope contained photographs, printed from online sources. Me at a medical conference, name tag visible. Me outside County General, white coat crisp against the brick building. Me at a fundraiser gala, caught mid-laugh at something the photographer couldn't capture. He'd constructed an entire understanding of my life from stolen moments and public records. My throat closed. I set the photographs down, stood abruptly, and walked to the window. Rain had started, drops streaking the glass in irregular patterns. Below, the parking lot gleamed wet and black under sodium lights. A car alarm wailed somewhere in the distance. I had a daughter. My voice came flat, controlled. Caroline, your granddaughter. The silence behind me stretched long and heavy. Had? Ovarian cancer. 5 years ago. She was 31. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. You have a grandson, too. Elijah. He's 7 now. Doesn't remember his mother. The bed springs creaked as he stood. I heard him cross the small room, felt him stop several feet behind me, close enough that I could hear his labored breathing, far enough to give me space. I'm sorry. 2 words, inadequate and honest. My fist hit the window frame, not hard enough to damage, but enough to hurt. The impact vibrated up my arm. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof, against the cars below, drowning out everything else. She needed more family. My voice cracked. During the treatments, after. Elijah needed more than just me. The motel room felt smaller with both of us standing. I watched our reflections ghost across the rain-streaked window. 2 strangers connected by blood and decades of absence. My jaw ached from clenching. Behind me, his breathing rattled with that concerning wheeze that spoke of years smoking or working in bad air or both. I turned. His face had collapsed inward, eyes wet but tearless. He'd aged 20 years in the span of our conversation. Good. The thought came vicious and immediate, followed by a wave of self-loathing that made my stomach clench. I need air. I grabbed my coat from the chair, fumbled with the sleeves. The fabric caught on my watch, twisted around my wrist. I yanked it free, heard stitching pop. Wait! He reached out, but didn't touch me. I pushed past him, out the door into the rain-soaked night. The cold hit my face like a slap. I walked fast across the parking lot, my sensible work shoes splashing through puddles, soaking through immediately. The rain plastered my hair to my skull, ran down inside my collar. I welcomed the discomfort, the sharp bite of wind, the way my lungs burned as I sucked in frigid air. Headlights swept across me. I turned toward them instinctively, raised my hand to shield my eyes. The car, a dark sedan with tinted windows, rolled past slowly, too slowly. The driver's window came down halfway. I couldn't see the face clearly, just the pale oval turned in my direction. The sedan pulled into a space 3 rows over, engine idling. Nobody got out. My pulse kicked up. I changed direction, heading not back toward the motel room, but toward the office building where I'd parked my car. The Crown Victoria sat alone under a broken streetlight, looking suddenly vulnerable in the darkness. I dug for my keys, fingers clumsy and cold. The key rings slipped from my grasp, clattered onto the wet asphalt. As I bent to retrieve them, footsteps approached from behind. Not the shuffling gait I associated with the man claiming to be my father. These moved with purpose, multiple sets, boots hitting pavement in near unison. "Dr. James." The voice came from my left. Male, unfamiliar, with the flat affect of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I straightened slowly, keys gripped tight between my fingers, points protruding like claws. 3 men formed a loose semicircle around my car. They wore dark clothes, practical rather than threatening, but something in their posture set off every alarm my body possessed. My shoulders hunched defensively. Adrenaline flooded my system, made my hands shake. "I think you have me confused with someone else." I kept my voice level, professional, the tone I used with belligerent patients in the ER. The closest one, broad shoulders, buzz cut, face forgettable except for a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, shook his head. "No confusion. We need you to come with us. Questions about your father." "I don't have a father." The words came automatic, bitter. Buzzcut smiled without warmth. "Raymond Archer disagrees. So do we." "Raymond." The name hit like a physical blow. 20 years I'd lived not knowing it, and now it felt weighted, dangerous. I shifted my stance, weight on my back foot, ready to bolt or fight. My mind raced through options, calculating distances, exits, witnesses. The motel office glowed weakly 50 yards away. The sedan still idled in the lot, another potential threat. "I'm a physician at County General. If I disappear, people will notice." "Nobody's disappearing." The second man moved closer, taller, thinner, with the wiry build of a runner. "Just a conversation. Voluntary cooperation." My laugh came harsh and sharp. "With 3 men in a dark parking lot? That's not voluntary, that's coercion." A door slammed. We all turned. Raymond. I couldn't make myself think of him differently, not as father or dad. Emerged from the motel room, moving faster than I'd seen him move before despite the limp. He held something dark in his right hand. For one horrible moment, I thought it was a gun, but as he came closer, I saw it was just a cell phone, held up, recording. "Back away from her." His voice carried across the lot, stronger than it had been in the room. "I'm streaming this live. Already got 200 viewers." Buzzcut's jaw clenched. The thin man's hand moved toward his jacket, then stopped. They looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. The third man, older, gray-haired, hanging back, spoke into a phone I hadn't seen him holding. "This isn't over." Buzzcut looked at me, then at Raymond. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. We're trying to help." "Help?" I spat the word. "By cornering me in a parking lot?" They backed away slowly, hands visible, movements careful. The thin man got into the sedan. Buzzcut and the older one headed for a dark SUV I hadn't noticed parked near the street. Engines started. Headlights flared. Within seconds, they'd vanished into traffic, leaving only wet pavement and the ghost of threat hanging in the air. My knees buckled. I caught myself against the Crown Victoria's hood, cold metal beneath my palms. Raymond reached me, still holding up the phone, thumb pressed to the screen. "Did you really stream that?" My voice came out small, shaky. "No?" He lowered the phone, and I saw his hand trembling worse than mine. But they didn't know that. The coffee shop he chose was 20 minutes away, a fluorescent bright chain restaurant off the highway, where truckers hunched over bottomless cups and tired servers moved between booths with mechanical efficiency. Raymond took a corner table, positioning himself so he could watch both exits. I sat across from him, my back to the wall, still feeling the phantom pressure of those men surrounding me in the parking lot. He ordered tea. I asked for water. Neither of us touched what arrived. His hands rested on the formica surface, fingers interlaced, knuckles swollen with arthritis. I studied those hands, broad palms, long fingers, a scar running diagonal across the left thumb. Hands that might have held me as an infant, hands I'd never known. Your mother, Claudia, she was 23 when we met. He spoke without looking up, addressing the table between us. I was 25, working construction in Baltimore. She was training to be a nurse at Johns Hopkins. I pressed my water glass against my forehead, cold and solid. The server refilled a trucker's coffee 3 tables over. A semi roared past on the highway outside, rattling the windows. Raymond reached into his jacket, the same movement that had terrified me earlier, and withdrew a manila envelope, its edges soft with handling. He slid it across the table. I stared at it like it might bite. Open it. Inside, photographs. The top one showed a young black woman with high cheekbones and natural hair pulled back in a headband, laughing at something off camera. She wore hospital scrubs and held a paper cup. Behind her, blurred but recognizable, the Johns Hopkins entrance sign. My mother, 38 years younger than my last memory of her. The second photo showed the same woman with a man I barely recognized as Raymond. Thinner, straighter, no limp, no gray in his hair. His arm draped across her shoulders, both smiling. Behind them, the inner harbor, water sparkling in summer sun. November 1982. Raymond's voice had gone rough. 2 months before she found out she was pregnant. I shuffled through more images. My mother pregnant, glowing. Raymond with his hand on her belly. The two of them painting what looked like a nursery. Her with a smudge of yellow on her cheek. A baby blanket, soft blue with white clouds, folded on a rocking chair. The last photograph stopped my breath. A hospital room. My mother propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a newborn wrapped in that same cloud blanket. Raymond beside her, one finger caught in the baby's tiny fist, his expression transformed by wonder. March 17th, 1983. He pulled the photo closer, touched its edge with infinite gentleness. The day you were born. Best day of my entire life. I shoved back from the table. The chair legs screamed against linoleum. Every head in the diner turned. I stumbled toward the bathroom, shouldered through the door, gripped the sink with both hands while my reflection swam and fragmented in the mirror. The door opened. Raymond filled the frame, blocking the fluorescent hallway light. I need you to understand what happened next. He stepped inside, let the door swing shut. 3 weeks after that photo, I was working a job in Glen Burnie. Residential building, 8 stories. My safety harness failed. I fell 6 floors. He tapped his left leg, the one that dragged. Crushed my femur, shattered my hip, fractured my spine in 2 places. They said I'd never walk again. Spent 4 months in the hospital, another 6 in rehab. The bathroom smelled of industrial cleaner and stale air freshener. Water dripped from a leaking faucet, each drop marking seconds I couldn't get back. When I finally got home, you and Claudia were gone. Apartment cleaned out, no forwarding address. Her hospital supervisor said she'd resigned. Nobody knew anything. He leaned against the wall, and I saw how much standing cost him. I spent everything I had looking, hired investigators, posted flyers, called every hospital, every nursing program in the tri-state area. Nothing. Why? The word tore out of me. Why would she run? Money, or the lack of it. His jaw worked. My insurance was garbage. Hospital bills buried us. I couldn't work, couldn't provide. She had a newborn and a partner who'd gone from breadwinner to liability in one fall. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, worn soft as fabric. A newspaper clipping, yellowed and cracked along its folds. The headline read, "Construction Worker Critical After Six-Story Fall." Below it, a photograph of emergency crews surrounding a body on a stretcher. She saw this? I touched the clipping, felt its fragile weight. Everyone saw it, front page of the Baltimore Sun. He refolded it with practiced care. The article said my chances of survival were slim, said even if I lived, I'd likely have permanent brain damage, never walk, need full-time care. The dripping faucet measured silence. Outside, the clatter of plates, murmur of conversations, normal life continuing while mine splintered and reformed. She thought you were dying. She thought I was already as good as dead, or worse, a burden that would destroy all three of us. He straightened, pain flickering across his features. I don't blame her. She was 23, alone, terrified, with a 3-week-old baby and medical bills that would take decades to pay. But you survived. You recovered. Enough to spend 20 years searching. He pushed off the wall, moved toward me. I never stopped, Aisha. Never once. Even when the trail went completely cold, even when people told me to move on, I kept looking. His hand came up slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his palm settled against my cheek, warm and calloused and shaking. My daughter. I finally found my daughter. The bathroom door burst open. Buzzcut filled the frame, the thin man behind him, and behind them the chaos of screaming, breaking glass, the server's voice cutting through. I already called the cops. Raymond's arm swept me behind him. Buzzcut lunged forward. Story block 910. Raymond's shoulder caught Buzzcut square in the chest, driving him backward into the thin man. The collision sent them both stumbling into a table, silverware clattering across tile. I pressed against the bathroom wall as Raymond pivoted, blocking the doorway with his body. The thin man recovered first, scrambling around the overturned table. His hand shot into his jacket. Metal glinted. A knife, short-bladed and purposeful. He came at Raymond low and fast, the way someone moves who's done this before. Raymond twisted sideways. The blade whispered past his ribs, so close I saw a fabric part. His elbow snapped down, catching the thin man's wrist with a crack that made my teeth ache. The knife skittered across the floor, spinning to rest near my feet. I scooped it up without thinking. The handle was warm, grip worn smooth by use. My fingers closed around it as Buzzcut surged forward again, meaty hands reaching for Raymond's throat. They grappled in the narrow hallway, locked together, neither giving ground. Raymond's foot hooked behind Buzzcut's knee. They went down hard, bodies slamming against the wall, picture frames jumping from the impact. The thin man staggered up, cradling his wrist, eyes tracking to the knife in my hand. Don't. My voice came out steady, despite the trembling in my legs. He smiled, teeth tobacco-stained, and started toward me anyway. The server appeared behind him wielding a cast-iron skillet. She swung it with both hands, catching him across the back of his skull. The impact made a sound like a melon splitting. He dropped without a sound, face first onto the floor, and didn't move. Nice hit. Raymond grunted the words while pressing Buzzcut's face into the tile, knee planted between his shoulder blades. My daddy taught me to swing for the fences. She stood over the thin man, skillet raised, ready for another pitch. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Buzzcut bucked and thrashed, but Raymond held him down, leveraging his weight with the efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times. The older man's breathing came hard, but controlled, sweat darkening his collar. The thin man groaned, tried to push himself up. The server adjusted her grip on the skillet. "Stay down, or I'll scramble your brains proper this time." He stayed down. 2 police cruisers screeched into the parking lot, lights painting the diner windows red and blue. Officers poured through the entrance, hands on their weapons, voices sharp with command. One immediately moved to secure Buzzcut, while another kicked the knife away from where it had fallen near my feet again. I'd dropped it when the thin man went down. A third officer, gray-haired and hard-faced, assessed the scene with practiced eyes. "Who can tell me what happened here?" Raymond straightened slowly, hands visible, movements deliberate. Blood seeped through his shirt where the knife had caught him after all. Not deep, but enough to stain the fabric dark. "These 2 have been following my daughter and me since Baltimore." He gestured to Buzzcut, now being handcuffed. "They assaulted me in a parking garage yesterday. Tried again here when they realized we'd spotted them." The officer's gaze shifted to me. I still stood pressed against the bathroom wall, my hands shaking now that the adrenaline was ebbing. "Ma'am, is this accurate?" I nodded, then found my voice. "They've been tracking us. I don't know why, but they're persistent." "I do." Raymond reached carefully into his jacket, moving slow for the officers. He pulled out a folded document, edges worn from handling. "I served papers on Vincent Calabrese 3 weeks ago. Witness testimony for a federal investigation. These are his way of sending a message." The gray-haired officer took the document, scanned it, and his expression hardened. He pulled out his radio, spoke codes I didn't understand. Within minutes, 2 more cruisers arrived, and a detective in a rumpled suit who looked like he'd been dragged from sleep. They separated us for statements. I sat in a booth while a young officer with tired eyes took notes, asked questions, verified details. Through the window, I watched paramedics check Raymond's side, bandage the shallow cut. He caught my eye once, offered a small nod that said more than words could. The statement took 40 minutes. By the time I finished, dawn was breaking pink and gold across the highway, transforming the asphalt into rivers of light. The diner staff had cleaned up the worst of the damage, righting tables, sweeping glass. The server brought me coffee without asking, set it down with a tired smile. "Your daddy's a tough old bird." "I'm learning that." The coffee scalded my tongue, grounded me in something real and immediate. Raymond emerged from the back office with the detective, both men's faces grave. They shook hands, a gesture of mutual respect between people who understood the weight of dangerous work. Raymond crossed to my booth, eased himself down with a wince. We sat in silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the world in ordinary morning light. Outside, the last police cruiser pulled away, carrying Buzzcut and the thin man toward whatever justice waited. Inside, the diner stirred back to life. Coffee brewing, griddle heating, the ritual rhythms of a new day. Raymond's hand rested on the table between us. Scarred knuckles, age-spotted skin. After a moment, I reached across and covered it with my own. Block 1010. 6 months folded into the rhythm of ordinary days that felt miraculous in their simplicity. The farmhouse kitchen smelled of cinnamon and fresh paint. Aisha stood at the counter kneading dough, flour dusting her forearms to the elbows. Through the window above the sink, She watched Raymond cross the yard toward the barn, his gait steadier now after months of physical therapy. The September sun caught the silver in his hair, turned him into something almost mythic against the golden fields beyond. She'd moved from Chicago in July. The decision had crystallized one sweltering afternoon when she'd stood in her cramped apartment, surrounded by 40 years of accumulated life, and realized none of it mattered compared to the man who'd searched for her through 2 decades of silence and lies. The school district here had hired her within a week. Experienced teachers were always needed, especially ones who brought big city credentials to small-town classrooms. The dough formed a smooth ball under her palms. She set it in the bowl to rise, covered it with the worn cloth Raymond's late wife had embroidered with chickens. That had been the hardest part, stepping into spaces another woman had made home, finding her place among the ghosts. But Raymond had boxed nothing away, hidden nothing. They'd spent long evenings on the porch while he told stories about Grace, his voice warm with remembered love, making space for Aisha without erasing what had come before. The screen door creaked. Raymond stamped dust from his boots on the mat, carried in the smell of hay and honest work. "Bread day?" His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Trying your mother's recipe. We'll see if I inherited any of her talent." He crossed to the sink, scrubbed his hands with the pumice soap. Through the window, the barn cat stalked something in the tall grass. The well pump kicked on with its familiar clank. Small sounds that had become the music of home. They'd driven to the cemetery in August, stood together at Grace's headstone while Raymond introduced them in a whisper meant only for the wind. Aisha had placed wildflowers on the grave, a gesture of gratitude toward the woman who'd loved her father through the years she couldn't. Later, they'd visited another plot. Raymond's parents, Aisha's grandparents, people she'd never known but whose blood ran in her veins. The school year had started 3 weeks ago. Aisha taught sophomore English now, filled young minds with poetry and composition, watched them struggle and grow. Some afternoons, she'd find Raymond waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his truck with the patient stillness of a man who'd learned waiting's true cost. They'd drive home through amber light, talking or not talking, the silence between them comfortable as old shoes. The mantel in the living room held new photographs now. Aisha at graduation, finally found after calling every Chicago school until she'd located her archived records. Raymond at 30, holding infant Aisha just days before everything shattered. The two of them from last month's county fair posed beside the Ferris wheel, their faces mirror images of surprised joy. Each frame a reclaimed moment, a stitch in the fabric of family. Raymond dried his hands, studied the rising dough with professional assessment. "Looks good. You've got the touch. Mom never taught me. She said baking was a waste of time." The word still felt strange on her tongue. Mom, now loaded with the weight of 20 years of calculated lies. They'd spoken once since that night at the diner. A brief phone call where Sylvia's voice had wavered between defiance and something that might have been remorse. Aisha had listened, offered no forgiveness, made no promises. Some fractures ran too deep for simple mending. She'd hung up knowing certain doors closed for good reason. The afternoon stretched long and golden. They worked in the garden together, harvesting the last tomatoes before frost could claim them. Aisha's hands moved through the vines, plucking ripe fruit, feeling the sun warm her shoulders. Raymond worked the next row over, his movements economical, efficient, the product of years spent coaxing life from stubborn earth. Neighbors had welcomed her with casseroles and curiosity. The town had buzzed with the story. Long-lost daughter returned, decades of separation resolved. Aisha had endured the attention with grace, let the talk exhaust itself, became simply Raymond's daughter, who taught English at the high school and made decent bread. Evening found them on the porch, the sky ablaze with sunset. Raymond rocked slowly in his chair, worked a crossword with the stub of a pencil. Aisha curled in the swing, grading papers, red pen moving across student attempts at analysis. Lightning bugs emerged from the grass, their cold fire dancing through the dusk. On 7 letters, reunion after long absence. Aisha smiled without looking up. Return. Too short. He counted boxes again. Needs more. Homecoming. The pencil scratched. Perfect. The bread had turned out well, crusty exterior, tender crumb, the kitchen rich with its warmth. They'd eaten it with butter and honey, simple and satisfying. Now the leftover loaf sat wrapped on the counter, waiting for tomorrow's breakfast. Every day, another small ritual, another thread woven into the tapestry of their rebuilt life. Stars emerged one by one, puncturing the deepening blue. Somewhere an owl called, hunting. The wind carried the scent of cut hay and approaching autumn. Raymond set aside his crossword, let his eyes close, face peaceful in the gathering dark. Aisha watched him, this man who'd never stopped searching, never stopped hoping. She'd gained more than a father these past months. She'd found roots, history, belonging. All the things her mother's lies had stolen now slowly returning, like water seeping back into parched ground. Thank you, she said quietly. Raymond opened one eye. For what? Not giving up. He reached across the space between their chairs, found her hand. His grip was warm, calloused, absolutely steady. Never crossed my mind. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.